Good morning, everybody. Nice to see the full house this morning. Look, we're really excited to come into San Angelo and work on the Skybox data center project. We've been looking for a home to build a campus in West Texas. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth market and been looking to plant a flag for about the last 3 years. I've built several data centers in the Texas market over the last handful of years. And, looking for a campus to be able to build a home for one of the big five. Generally, what'll end up happening is we'll build and it'll be an AWS, a Microsoft, a Google, one of the larger companies that'll end up coming and leasing the buildings from us. That's who you'll end up having in your backyard. And, we ended up finding this project and we're really excited to come into the community, build it out. We also want to make sure that when we do come into a community, we also partner with the community. We're not just going to come in, build, sell, leave, which is, one of the things that you usually hear a lot about data center developers. I've been building data centers for 26 years now. I've been a co-founder of 3 different data center companies. And, one of the things that I've learned over the years is, garnering community support is really important for a lot of these projects. And I want to make sure that, we've got a visible presence in the community, that we come in and that we help, sponsor events, that we partner with school districts, that we sponsor programs, as far as internships, things like that. And we do want to be visible. These projects are very large. They're going to be millions of square feet of data center. They're multi-billion-dollar projects. They bring a lot of tax revenue, into the communities. And, we're going to be building here for about the next 7 years. So it's very important for us to have a visible presence in the community and to have a positive impact on the community, not a, negative impact on the community. So, we do want to make sure that, if anybody has questions, anything that you want to cover with us, we're certainly, more than happy to sit down, talk, and, we're here for the long haul. And, anything we can do to help support, by all means, please let us know. So that's it. Thanks, everybody.
All right, we're going to start out with what I want to say is probably one of the most anticipated things we've waited on to happen here. For those of y'all that I haven't met, my name is Tom Thompson. I'm the mayor of the city of San Angelo. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. I want to take a special moment to thank my fellow council members that have spent a lot of time in the trenches answering questions about this as we move forward. I want to say every time I sit down and visit with somebody that has experience in the data center industry as deep as y'all do, I feel better when I walk away than when I started. Last night, I got to sit down with y'all for the first time and have conversations. I just want to briefly go down. Y'all've met Chris. I want to go down and introduce Jeremiah. I want to introduce Mike. Give a quick bio about yourself and what you do, and we'll roll back in, and then I've got some questions here. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeremiah Collins. I'm the Senior Vice President of Energy Acquisition for Emergent Data Centers.
Sure. A little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a 30-year power expert. I've spent my whole career studying power systems and working with large users on how to and where to find generation and the right kind of generation for power. Today we're here talking about a grid-based project, and but we'll focus on, power is key for our projects, so we focus on everything that we can find that will bring us reliable power. We are really lucky to be here. This particular interconnection point, this particular team that we're working with from AEP is top notch, and then to be in a community like this that has planned and worked toward this type of project. We're very lucky to be here. So thank you for having us.
Jeremiah, thank you. Mike, I wanted to come in a little bit before you start. I want you to go back into your history a little bit about not only domestically, but what you've done globally too, because I think that's a key thing that enlightens the crowd about how deep Chris has built a team to handle this project.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. I'm Mike Coleman. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for Emergent. We had a great conversation last evening. Again, I think we're all third-year veterans in this industry. I think when I started, we were still building them out in telcos, and we didn't have the term data center yet. I've been able to work on both sides, the wholesale maybe provider side, but I have a long career on the operator and the owner side. So I spent I don't how many of you still have a Yahoo email address. I started long ago building out the Yahoo infrastructure, not just in the U.S. but globally, and then operating the data centers for a long time in not just here in the U.S. but in Europe and Asia. I moved from Yahoo to Google. I managed all of the Google data centers globally, and I've operated 24 countries, 6,000 people working on these data centers for a very long time. I just recently finished about 8 years working with ByteDance. So I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with TikTok and that app. Maybe might spend too much time on it occasionally. So I've helped them build out their infrastructure globally here in the U.S. and Europe and Southeast Asia as well. So taking on this journey with Chris to develop this U.S. infrastructure and bring some data centers here to Texas.
Thank you, Mike. Chris, you've already had the chance to introduce yourself. You opened up this morning. Where I'll start off is one of the main things that people bring up all the time is talking about water. All right. So it's been a hot point, an action item that a lot of people have brought up questions. And I think we're not here to sell everybody. We're here, and I'm here as a mayor to ask very, directional, vetted questions to make sure this is what's a fit for San Angelo and Tom Grant County. And just like I said before, the more I hear of your history and your experiences over the past 20 plus years, water's almost become a non-discussion point. And you want to expand upon basically what kind of water you would see and what kind of usage we would see here?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I really think that, as water usage is concerned with a lot of these projects, I don't want to say there's a lot of misinformation in the market, but there is. We use, by and large, what we call closed loop systems. So, you will hear a lot about evap, and, there is one specific company in the industry that uses evap, and they use a lot of water. We're not it. We're a data center owner, developer, operator. We lease our facilities out to companies that will come in and use it. When we do that, we get to control the technology that we're deploying in our facilities. And by doing that, Mike will come in, design and engineer a building, and we build a closed loop system. So basically what that is you can almost think of it, like a radiator. Within a building, we've got, a loop, we fill it with water, it gets charged, and then we close it. So with that, you're not continuously bringing water into that system. Every couple of years, yes, we may have to tap it off or open it up, fill it, tap it, but we're not continuing to bring water into that. Our facilities, once they're up and running, you're literally using water to run sinks, flush toilets, and, water the landscaping on the facilities. That's all we're using. So, our campus that you're looking out, or looking for us to build out there is about 1 gigawatt. That's a lot of energy. That's also going to be somewhere around 3.5-4 million square feet. So that's a lot of square feet. If you put that in correlation with, what we call a WUE, which is the water utilization efficiency, our 4.5 million square feet will use about equal to what 12 homes uses annually. That's it. So, when you start hearing about the amount of water that data centers are using, and, how are we going to affect the water table, and we're going to suck all the aquifers dry, I'm not using a fraction of what a golf course uses. Okay. I don't use as much as probably what you're going to put in your swimming pool. So, it's literally, just going to be flushing toilets, sinks, and landscape. Our systems, we can literally bring in water trucks and, fill up our system. We don't even need city water to get our sites up and running. So we could literally bring in offsite water to get these things up. So, from an efficiency perspective, systems have come a long way with data centers. I just wish more people would really spend time talking about it. They don't. And I think a lot of people, they see articles and they hear things on the internet and they grasp onto the easiest thing they can, which is, they hear something negative about the water use. And I get it. People get scared. But, they should really spend more time talking to us and we could explain to them that it's not that bad. Even when you look at a climate like Texas, we built campuses in Phoenix, Arizona, and that was one of the requirements, when I was dealing with the mayor there. We had to have a closed loop system. We could not use city water, and it was not an issue. So we're going to do the same thing here that we do, and we're not just doing it in Texas. We use closed loop systems on all of our projects everywhere.
Well, and it's just something we've dealt with as a community, and a lot of people have a voice. And some of them want to project over others, but we have to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask valid questions. We have and will install basically a 380 agreement, which is an exchange of obligations between the city and Skybox. And we have the opportunity to put tons of information in there. And we'll just say these are obligations back and forth. And I think that provides us a lot of security and safety as what we'll see in the oncoming future. Now, as we're discussing this, I want to talk about job growth and economic impact. I mean, just the tax revenue off one of these things. So San Angelo brings in about $62 million a year in property taxes, about $25 million a year in sales tax. I've been tracking Abilene. As everybody knows, Abilene's got to develop. Abilene is tracking up nearly 40% a month in sales tax. So if you we're looking at, 2 or 3x of our property tax and 1x of our sales tax during construction. What jobs are we going to see? I know there's going to be some growing pains, and what is that timeline? What do you think this does to our local economy as far as impact, economic impact?
Mike, I don't know if you want to maybe tackle, the job growth. I can jump in on part of it, but, I think you're probably better suited for that.
Yeah, we compartmentalize it in a few different areas. The development and construction has a significant impact, and the largest, I think the largest impact on overall job creation and maybe stimulus for the community. The project of this size, as Chris mentioned earlier, it's going to take years of phases to build out. I think if you mentioned the project in Abilene, if you were to go over there and look at it, we would have to come in and build housing for the number of people that are going to come out here to work. There's not enough local workforce to actually build this, and some of the specialized workforce comes in. So I would say on a daily basis out there in Abilene, there's 3,000 to 5,000 people a day showing up to the site just for the construction itself. And as we said, it takes a few years. As the sites stabilize, depending on the individual customer that ends up leasing the space, it gets very quiet. I think until a data center ends up in your community and you see it in its natural state, in that stabilized state, you drive by it, you wouldn't know it was there. There's virtually no noise. There's no truck traffic. Once you fill the building with servers and you close the door, you've got a highly technical workforce inside working on fiber connectivity and network equipment. installation of the servers, a lot of what we refer to as break fix, or the overall upkeep and maintenance, and swapping out the equipment. I think what a lot of people also might not be aware of is these servers. What we refer to, they refresh. It's like an arms race. The companies are chasing each other for revenue, and the computers or these servers are what they use to compete against each other, and that the efficiency of these CPUs and how much output they create is their differentiator. So as the technology evolves, which it does almost on a monthly basis for us, at a certain point, you have to pull out what's there and replace everything entirely. So there is a constant refresh of this IT equipment that's inside. So you're looking at a wide.
So let me interrupt. When you say a constant refresh, that's also a reevaluation of what it's worth at that time too. I think we heard that talk last night. Is the value of the
It's a significant reinvestment every 3 to 5 years in the facility. Correct. Yeah, and as we discussed, depending on what the facility is used for, the investment of the IT infrastructure inside the building is anywhere from, say, 5 to 10 times the cost of building the entire facility. So our work is a significant investment, but the IT infrastructure is a great deal more. Yeah. So as it starts to stabilize, there's this highly technical workforce. But if you think about these buildings, they're very complex mechanical and electrical systems in a box, with backup generation and complicated systems to make sure that that everyone here has a smartphone. When you open up an app and it slows down a little bit, or something takes a little time to load, you get upset. That's probably because something in the data center is not working. And
I've always thought that was a plot by Apple to make me go buy a new iPhone.
No, well, there is that. I mean, I
swear
I can't speak for Apple, but
I'll take that to the grave.
but that planned obsolescence is a part of it as well. But then, outside of the IT infrastructure, there's a significant now infrastructure that needs to be maintained, mechanical and electrical, and then engine mechanics for the machines. We've got complex equipment inside, UPS or uninterruptible power supplies, batteries, rectifiers. It's a very complex system, and it needs a lot of high tech, highly qualified, skilled workforce locally.
So what would you suggest a workforce to prepare? I mean, what area of concentration and expertise do you need as you start construction, as you move forward? Is it electrical? I mean, it's all infrastructure, but is there a specific thing? If somebody's out there watching today and they want to get in the way or get in between, where would you go?
What I would say is about 70% of the total CapEx we spend is on electrical and mechanical. Electrical being probably the scarcest source of skilled labor that we can get, and mechanical right behind it. The rest of it is a concrete tilt up, building. We can find those trades, but locally, skilled tradesmen, electrical, mechanical is probably the largest workforce out there.
All right, thank you. Jeremiah, I don't want to leave you out. I mean, if you got you come from a very concentrated spot of somebody that's had the tap dance around this as development moves out of the Metroplex, Fort Worth West. So give us a little bit of your input of what you've seen, and kind of as your title is Senior VP of Source and Power, what you look for here.
So we're looking for welcoming communities. B, we're looking for infrastructure that can handle the kind of work that we need to do, and that is draw down large amounts of power, 8,760 hours a year. We need constant power. The infrastructure is probably the hardest part. The generation, we can fix generation in a matter of years. But as transmission is needed, this was touched upon earlier, transmission is very hard to fix. We have to run it, you heard Fred talk about just the distances they have to run some transmission and the exposure that transmission has to the outdoors. Transmission is also hard to fix right now because the average piece of infrastructure in our grid is 55 years old. it has not been touched. But it hasn't had it's been touched when it has an issue, or it's coming up on its, it's starting to degrade. But this, we had this confluence of events. We decarbonized our economy, began to electrify our transportation. We took a lot of plants out of service before we replaced them with generation. And then we had a dilapidated grid. And so all of these things have created this confluence. All the while, we had data centers coming on. Data is everywhere. I mean, I've said this 100 times, but during the big freeze 5 years ago, we had a pipe break in our house and we were out of our house for a year. We had to replace all the appliances. Those appliances are, now I have Wi-Fi on my dishwasher. I have no idea when I'm going to communicate with my dishwasher or my refrigerator, right? But it's everywhere. It's in our phones. It's in our watches. It's in our cars. It's everything that we do at work. Data is important. I have a friend who had a heart replacement recently. She gets all of her data off of an app on her phone. That has to go through somewhere. That has to be housed somewhere. That's what these things do. But keeping up with that. And then we, all the while with this kind of growth, this is unprecedented growth. We haven't seen growth like this ever. 50 years, we were flat. Each year we would make some technological advances in energy efficiency, and it would keep up with the demand, plus or minus 1%. Now it's, we're seeing hockey stick type demand. Everybody's complaining about it. Fortunately, we live in a state where we have probably the most successful energy market and maybe in the world. It's if we were in California, we'd be paying a quarter, 25 cents per kilowatt. Can you imagine what that would do to your checks? We've seen residential cost growth, but a lot of the development that's going on now is at the benefit of the customer. And what I mean by that is we pay for every upgrade that we touch, everything that's needed. But a lot of this infrastructure growth that's happening, these 765 lines, they're more important than we can possibly imagine. Energy is so highly correlative. Electricity is so highly correlative to what the economy does. The more we have, the better our economies do. We know this. I'll give you an example. We're roughly 35 million people. We're a 90 plus gig system. Mexico is 135 million people. They're roughly the same peaking capacity. It tells us, that our ability to generate creates dollars and jobs, and this is what this is doing. This revolution is going to give us the backbone to create things that so many other communities don't have, and also support it. These data centers are the most important things we will build from a national security standpoint, as well as from a quality of living standpoint. We need the data to survive.
The data center AI revolution is probably the single most significant change in our lives. And you can go back and just backtrack it through aviation, backtrack it through cars. When we moved from horse and buggy to cars, people's main concern was environment, public safety, energy. How are we going to pay for all these railroads? How are we going to get all these streets? And as you look at where we are as the United States and Texas, Texas, you're here is because we are a great fit for what's coming. All right. It's fairly remote to a degree and it provides something, but a lot of people wondering just how invasive sometimes things happen. And one of those questions we always get is about noise. And so I'll flip it back to you and let you start and then delegate that as you see fit. But people talk a lot about it. Andy Marquis is here, and Andy has a decibel meter in the back. I don't know what we're running at right now. Just to put people in the context, what are you reading right now, Andy? All right. So I'm at 75. So I'll use that as the base right now. I'll let you take off the conversation from there, Chris, about where you are past the wall, inside the building, at the first wall, and outside the building.
the property borders a roadway. And I think if you put a meter out at the roadway, that decibel meter is probably going to peg pretty close to 100. We're never going to be heard. So, the two things that everybody really focuses in on when you think about, data centers and data center usage is going to be the generators and, the rooftop package units, right? And, look, I've been doing this since 1996. And people always think about the rooftop package units, and it's not, it's not where they're at. The sound cascade's about 2 miles away. Okay. And I remember, hearing this humming noise, in Santa Clara, California, where I used to work for a company called Digital Realty Trust. And the neighborhoods used to get really upset about it. Well, old units really made a lot of noise. They now develop units with basically what they call an owl wing design. And the units are very quiet. You barely hear anything whatsoever. The decibel levels that are coming off of those are between 55 and 60, dB. They're very quiet. The generators, they either come in enclosures or, we'll have them shipped without enclosures, and then we will build, basically, CME walled, housing for them, and we drop them in there. They come with noise suppressors on them. I can't tell you how many times I've been standing next to a generator that you didn't even know was running. The only reason why you knew it was running is because the plume was up. So, if I'm standing at the facility and I've got a roadway, if everything is running full tilt, every one of the generators is on, every one of the rooftop package units is going, you're going to hear the freeway or you're going to hear the roadway. You're not going to hear anything going on at the data center. So our noise level is going to be, I think with everything running somewhere maybe between 65 and 70. That's it.
And that's at the exterior of the building.
Yes.
All right. So
inside is going to be significantly louder. Inside of a data hall, yes, there's a lot of noise going on inside.
that's your problem.
That's my problem.
Our concern is outside the wall. And I want to briefly touch on that. There's been a lot of input and conversation about things that I think are your business, your concerns, from low frequency to when you're going to cycle the generators. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how often you cycle the generators. What do you pick a time for it? Maybe just give us a little bit, expand upon that.
Yeah, it's pretty standard for us and any company that has a generator backup for their business. They run 30 minutes a month. We kind of rotate through and we spin them up and make sure that they're ready for when an emergency does happen. It's like parking a car in the garage and never starting it for a year, and you're like, hey, I want to go out and drive that today, and then shoot, I probably should have maintained this for a year. So it's really, we really just start them up, run them through the transfer process to make sure that if it, not only can it start up, but it'll take load when we transfer it over, and then we shut them down. And we do some preventative maintenance. Unless there is a utility outage, we don't run them. And we're limited even on that based on the air quality run hours that we're allotted by the state.
So are there standards put to you that are energy performance levels? I mean, are there metrics that you put in place, agree to, and say, this is where we're going to be, depending on somebody's 380 agreement? I've had a lot of people question, well, will they ever go over this amount of energy, and what happens if they're below? I know you don't want to hop in and off the grid, especially quickly. Things need to phase in and out. So expand upon that a little.
So similar to what Chris had mentioned earlier with the WE, I think the single most important metric in the data center industry is PUE, which is our power utilization efficiency. That is literally how we measure everything in the data center. And it's the single largest cost to the tenant, right? The power is the single largest ongoing operating expense for the building. And the better we design the building from a PUE perspective, that includes the operation of the mechanical heat, the cooling, or what we really refer to as the heat rejection from the building, and then the distribution of the energy in the building. The better that we get that, the more commercially viable it is, and the more likely we're going to have a tenant. So we're all incentivized to bring the energy utilization down. And so PUE is that term. If anybody wants to look it up, we design. It's interesting. We try, like any engineering kind of like civil type work. You like, if you're doing a bridge or whatever it might be, you're going to engineer towards the worst scenario. That worst design day is what we call it. But you know, for the most part, it runs at a much higher efficiency on what we refer to as an annualized basis. So our target is, on a closed loop system. This is kind of interesting. This hangover from the water use on data centers is a legacy effect, and it was something that the industry was guilty of, because the current technology we're using today for the dry coolers in this closed loop system didn't exist at a level that we could run the power efficiently.
Right. And a lot of people brought up at first when the discussion started over a year ago was water usage, but they were looking at historic legacy. I mean, I think everybody, when they Googled or, Chat GPT did, it all went to Virginia and in those areas and looked about it. And I try to tell people, I bought a book about data center management off Amazon. It was $97 and 763 pages. It showed up 2 days ago, second version. It is already out of date. That industry has moved. And if anybody wants that book, I'd almost give it to you. All right. But anyway, long story short, there was some things in there that help you learn the sound bites. A lot of us don't know how to communicate in the language that you talk, and we're trying to make sure that our people understand that, and we're the conduit between it. But we look at how that's going to go forward, and we look at community engagement. So I want to stop in there. We talked a little bit about this last night. Chris, is maybe throw some examples out about how you would engage with the community. Social corporate responsibility has become huge. This room is filled up with 90% of it. How do you work with schools and through, let's say, internships? What things can you do to help us participate better?
Look, I think every community is different, and we've engaged different communities in different ways. I don't know what the community needs. So I think first and foremost, it's really getting in and sitting down and listening and finding out, what does the community need? Where can we be impactful? Where can we be helpful? And every market has been a little bit different, in Chicago, Elk Grove Village, working with Mayor Johnson, we sat down and we talked about what were the things that were important to him. And, we engaged on that. I think his needs and desires were probably a lot different than, what this community wants. The name of the community is Elk Grove Village. Well, he asked me for almost $1 million worth of bronze elk statues to be placed around the property.
I'd be real careful on that one right now. I'd be real careful. Be real careful.
My answer was no. Okay.
Well, maybe not. Maybe loosen that up a little bit there.
So, the aesthetics of, our project were really important because it was what they considered part of the gateway to the city. And, you will find with us, that's one of the reputations for data centers is that they're unsightly. And if you do get on and you Google data centers, one of the first things that pops up is, the bookseller has a lot of these gray data centers with, yellow parapets around the buildings. They're really ugly. That is not what I built. I can show you a lot of examples of buildings that I've branded over the last 20 years. And I was building in Elk Grove Village, and, they look like Class A office, and there's a reason for that. And that is exactly what I'm going to bring to this community. It's important to me that when somebody looks at one of our projects, they say, that's an emergent building, right? So, first and foremost, I want to make sure that it doesn't look like one of the Borg cubes from, Star Trek, because if you go to Midlothian and you look what Google built there, ooh, boy, it's not good. That's not what we're going to do here. Then sitting down and understanding, the local school district. What are some of the things that we can do to partner with them? What are some of the projects, or programs that they have that we can sponsor? What can we help them with? Working with economic development, sitting down and understanding what are some of the things that, maybe the community doesn't have budget for that, they'd really like to have. We can engage and work with that, sitting down with you and understanding, what are some of the things that, the community's really been looking for. In Michigan, one of our projects, there was, they didn't want to see our facilities. So they wanted us to build, berms around the campus, but they also wanted us to take and donate, acreage and build a large, sports complex, right? So, they wanted us to give back and build ball fields and things like that. Okay. It's not really that expensive in the grand scheme of things. When you're looking at a data center development, ball fields are cheap. I just need to understand what are the things that the communities needs. I don't want to spend money frivolously, but what are the things that the community needs?
And last night I learned a little bit about each one of you. All right. You've got 3 kids, one of which would impress me as a retired Marine, correct? In the plumbing industry, your other 2. But, number one, thank you for supporting him in his service. But it let me know that you also feel the community, all right? And so many people, and you've brought it up here before, feel like you're going to be here, build, and you're going to leave. And that's not the case. Your other 2, boys, I think, are in the industry. Jeremiah, we talked a little bit about your family, but talk about what you feel like with the community and input that you've seen other people need that may be beneficial for here, Jeremiah.
Sure. Well, coming from a power focus, these projects provide a great deal of money back to their communities, both and not only through the transmission fees that we pay, because those are big dollars that go back into the utility, and the utility then takes that money and modernizes the grid with it. But in addition to that, these fund schools and local communities in ways that Chris has talked about, and in ways that that we see in other areas. You'll see public-private partnerships with things for educational factors. Creating apprenticeship programs, creating and then in some projects where it's needed in colder environments, you might see district heating. So there'll be a steam offtake or something from things like that. And so there's a whole variety of ways that we see these things, but we're also creating skilled labor pools, and those are that will catch fire. With each job that's created catches another job, and then all of a sudden people say, that's where I need to go for that technology and that learning. And so
Awesome. Thank you. Tell you what, we're getting close to our 10 o'clock hard stop, but I want to open it up. I've got a couple more questions, but I think I want to ask some questions here of the audience. Let's go and get 2 questions out of the audience. So you've already had one. I'm going to get you second. Joe, and this is that part where you're standing at a funeral and the person stands up and says, "Can I talk?" And you just don't know what they're going to say. But Joe, as a military veteran, runs a media agency, you and I have had some very detailed, long communications and conversations about what's best, not for us, but what's best for the city. And so with that, you've got a question. I just wanted to preface it out. What have you got?
My question is about the business model of particularly this data center. I've heard numbers of billions and billions of dollars of property value increases to the corpus of San Angelo, the county. What is the business model? And second question I have, and this is going against Mayor Tom Thompson a little bit. Wouldn't it be better, if we're going to call this thing a hyperscale, wouldn't it be better if we just go ahead and say we open this data center up to all types of computers or servers, including SMCI, NVIDIA chips, and all that kind of stuff, instead of just calling it just a cloud storage thing? Because would we make more valuation on all the equipment in there? But I need someone to explain the business model of the data center and how that increases property value first.
So happy to tackle that. So, our business model is basically to design, what we start with is a powered shell. Okay. 4 walls, roof, transformers, and the ability to be able to utilize the amount of power that we've got coming to the substation. So, we'll either design, a system that can support cloud or GPU deployments. So we get a building to a certain point where we can take it one direction or another. When we engage customers, they'll come in and they'll dictate to us what they want to see, because we're not the ones that are going to be populating the building with all the IT equipment. We're the owners, we're the builders, we're the operators. So we're going to continue to manage and maintain the building. The customer is going to lease the building from us. So they're going to say, okay, here's what's going to go in the building. We need X amount of cabinets. They're going to be at X amount of watts per square foot. If it's cloud, maybe they're going to be 10 to 15 kilowatts per cabinet. If it's going to be, GPU based AI factory, maybe they're going to be 150 watts, per cabinet. We don't know. That's going to get dictated by whether it's Google, Microsoft, or, maybe it's OpenAI. We don't know yet. We won't know until we start building the buildings. And we can't really go to market until we know when ERCOT and AEP are going to guarantee when we're going to get our power. So there's a bit of a circular that goes on with that. As far as the nomenclature for whether it's a cloud facility or a hyperscale facility, we're totally open to, whoever comes in there. I don't care if it's DoD, Google, or anybody else. As long as they pay their rent, I'm a landlord at the end of the day. I'm a real estate developer. That's the business model. So you could call it cloud, you could call it hyperscale, you could call it an AI factory. That's just all marketing fluff.
So what's the business model? How does this increase the property value in the county?
So the property value is just like any other building. Okay. So you build a hotel, that increases the property value. You build an apartment complex, it increases the property value. If I go in and I build 3 million square feet, that's going to increase the property value. So if I build a cloud facility or an AI facility, doesn't make any difference. I'm going to spend the same amount of money on those facilities, give or take. It's going to be relatively close. Okay. We look at from a cost per megawatt is how we build. And if I've got a gigawatt worth of power out there, it's going to cost about $16 million per megawatt to build. So if I've got, 1,000 megawatts, that's about $16 billion to build it. Okay. In total over a period of 6 or 7 years, that's $16 billion in real value that goes into the property. That's where you're seeing the property value come up. So beyond that, the customers are then going to come in and bring in their IT equipment. The customer's IT equipment, as Mike was mentioning earlier, is 4 to 5 times what I've now spent on those buildings. That's how much that equipment costs. And they're going to roll that in there and they're going to refresh it because they need to upgrade that equipment to make sure that they've got the newest and fastest chips every 3 to 5 years. So that generates sales tax revenue because it's real property. They have to continue to pay the taxes on that. We have to pay our property taxes every year. So that's where you're seeing the property tax revenue come from, or, the sales tax revenue, because it's software, servers, and then, obviously you've got all your, labor and everything on top of that.
Joe, Fred, hold on. Steve, hold on. We have one question over here, and then we'll finish with you, Steve. So let's go ahead.
So talking about skilled labor with IB, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, that's what we do. We've done a lot of y'all's data centers, including the one out in Apple. With that being said, would y'all be willing to talk about better builder standards or even a project labor agreement for multi-crafts to help secure that skilled labor as well as helping veterans and minority underprivileged communities that those agreements help out?
So you might.
Yeah, I'm absolutely open to it. I didn't hear the first thing you said. Open to what was it before the labor agreement? Building standards. Always interested in hearing what you have to say. We do use a global standard. The standards are really high. We're not building to international building code. If you can imagine, if you're going to drop $100 billion worth of IT equipment, the electrical and mechanical systems are probably the most complex and important part of it. And so there is no shortcutting there. And as I said earlier, that trained, skilled labor force is probably the most critical piece to the overall development. Yeah. And it's not just the construction. It's 30 years of ongoing maintenance and support that's required for that facility, which is quite large. So would love to have a conversation with you guys. Yeah.
Mike, thank you very much. Steve, let's you be our final question.
So you talked about the cost to build, but the value in real estate is income. So until you lease it, when you say I have income, do you pre-lease before you start construction?
So the answer is yes and no. Okay. So when we go into a market, we always come in with the mindset that we're going to do speculative development. So I don't come in and have a customer in tow. That's not the business plan. I will tell you though, with this industry, because it is moving as fast as it is, by the time we start turning dirt, I'm already in conversations with customers. So from that perspective, we have a pretty good indication of who our customer is going to be by the time, the four walls are coming up. It's already leased at that point. Sure. And everybody right now is being successful. Nobody's sitting on vacant buildings in the data center industry.
What's the connection between emergence and snow? I hear those.
So it's the Skybox project, and Emergent is the developer.
All right. We're going to wrap it up right there. We've hit our 10 o'clock, but what I want to close and tell everybody is I had conversations last night. These people have agreed to come back and have open conversations, sit down and discuss it. And to be honest, last night was my first time to meet these people face to face. It was for a lot of us. Okay. So there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things that people want to ask. And I found it very interesting that y'all were more than willing to come in. And now that we're past the zoning issue, we're basically waiting on AEP and ERCOT to make some moves. But I will bring them back and I will ask them to come back 2 or 3 different occasions and they will be here. We'll sit together and have some sessions. I don't know if we'll have them at McNeese or back here, but we'll give everybody chances to come in and do that. And I just want to finish it up with, I can't thank y'all enough for coming here, sharing your time with us. And I'd like for everybody to thank y'all for coming here today too.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.